In this video, we're going to be starting off our discussion on sequencing a machine with a brief overview of the different sequencer modes on the hardware and on the software. So, in order to fully understand how to best use the note sequencing in machine, you first have to understand the difference between the two different types of sequencing modes, the arrangement view and the ideas mode. If you're already more experienced with the machine platform, then you may already know about these modes and the various different ways you can use them. But if you don't understand, then it's important to understand the difference between the arrangement mode and the ideas mode. This is going to be the most basic video of the course. I just wanted to make sure to include it so that we can bring everybody up to speed before we dive into more advanced note sequencing. So the machine platform is a little bit different than traditional digital audio workstations. All the different sections we create are based on patterns, which are essentially clips we fill with sequencer data. So if we hold down the pattern button on the machine controller, you'll see that in the current project I'm working on, there are two different pattern clips. And I can easily switch between the two by just selecting them. These pattern clips are layered on top of one another to create various different musical sequences. So whenever I switch over to the ideas mode by pressing the arranger button, you could see that we have both drums and a bass pattern. So in machine, the notes inside these pattern clips are similar to traditional MIDI clips in a normal digital audio workstation. But the cool part about the various different patterns that we have in our note sequencer is that whenever you make a change to one of the notes in one of these clips, that change will be reflected across all the different copies of that pattern. So let's say, for example, you had the first pattern, pattern 1, repeated several times throughout a song. Whenever I make an edit to that pattern, it's going to change that sequence in every single instance of that pattern. So now that I have the basics out of the way, we can dive a little bit more in depth into the various different parts. So to navigate between the two different modes, select the Shift control and then press the Arrange button to swap between them. So we have the sequencer mode and the ideas mode. Additionally, in the software, you can switch between the two modes in the upper left-hand corner by toggling on or off this button. So the first of these modes is called the arrangement mode, or sometimes called the song mode. This is the section of the machine sequencer that we're going to be using most in this course. The most important feature of this mode is that it programs the musical sequences in a linear fashion. This means that your project has a dedicated start and end point. So this mode will let you program your songs from start to finish. So whenever you press play, it'll start from the beginning of the track and then play through the entire sequence. If we wanted to add on a new section to our sequence, we can first press create, and then you'll see that it's created a new section in our sequence. This is the very beginning, and then it moves through our whole project. And now we have this new section that we can program. And then we can select the pattern that we want to fill out that sequence. So we could use this encoder and select intro. And now in our sequencer, the intro section has been repeated and is now playing in the third position in our track. And then if I wanted to extend out that length, say for example, I wanted that part to play 4 times, I can use this length control and adjust that to 4 bars. And now you can see this repeated our intro pattern 4 different times. If I want to remove this section, I can just hit the remove button and it will remove the clip. The next mode is the ideas mode. So this section will let you combine various different pattern clips to try out new ideas. This was a mode that was added into Machine whenever the Machine Jam controller was originally released, but its functions are very similar to the clip view in Ableton Live if you're familiar with that software. This means that our musical content is programmed in a non-linear fashion. So this mode isn't used to program complete songs, rather it's used to build up musical ideas when trying to come up with new musical parts, or using various different patterns in a live performance setting, where you can build up or break down a track on the fly. So what we can do now is just show you a quick example of how this would work. So what we have on the main section is these main headers. You'll see that we have an introduction section and a verse section, which you could just toggle by hitting these buttons. And then inside those sections, we can select various different patterns. So let's say in our verse, we had just kind of a standard low bass line going on. So we can use this encoder to push to the right to select our bass line. We can move it down, you select the second part, and then I can push this back over and actually deselect our drum pattern. So this is just the bass by itself. And then we can use the ideas mode to audition various different drum patterns for this bass line. So let's move back over to our drum group. And then we can move our encoder to select the first drum pattern. Then we can press the restart from beginning button to hear our drum pattern play back with that bass. And then I can move this encoder and select the second drum pattern, and we can hear what that sounds like with our bass line. Whenever your project's playing back, you can actually change your patterns to audition your new drum patterns in real time. So that would just be like this. And if I wanted to create a new pattern section, all I would have to do is press this plus mark. And that gives us a new scene to work with. By default, it's just labeled numerically, so it's labeled scene 3. And then I could go in, and let's just say I wanted to have the bass line play on its own for a breakdown or something like that. We just move over to our bass line, rotate the encoder, and select the bass part. And now we have a new scene to work with that we can load up into our sequencer. So if I wanted to load in the bass part as a breakdown into our song, I could just hit Shift Arrange, hit Create, select Scene 3, and then now in our project, we have our entire song so far, and then that new bass line breakdown added into the very end of our section. And this is the way that I like to compose my tracks whenever I'm using Maschine. I find the best way for me to write songs in Maschine is to use a combination of the ideas mode to kind of build and get started on the different sections of a song, and then use the arrangement view to actually build out the full arrangement of the track. So while main focus is going to be on the song's arrangement view, we're going to be kind of using a combination of the various different modes throughout this course. So that concludes this video on the various different sequencing modes on the Maschine Mark III software and controller. This is definitely a more basic video, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone's on the same page before moving forward onto more advanced note sequencing tips. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you in the next video.